Words are bridges.
शब्द सेतु हैं।
अल्फाज दिलों को और इंसानियत को जोड़ने का एक अजीम और तरीन पुल है।
വാക്കുകൾ പാലങ്ങളാണ്.
लफ्ज़ सैरी कदलतारान
वहीनतहम
आखर हमार मेल सन आखर हमार जोड़
হকটাই সমন্বয়ৰ হেতু
Cocktail rock, yakraise.
Thuhi inkung kaina siam tu ani.
Ajrahana apati disale.
Grauthaining yaukrai.
Shabda setu hoin.
शब्दां दी सांस।
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of our festival co-directors Namita Gokhale and William Dalrymple, festival producer Sonjoy Roy, and all of us at Teamwork Arts, I welcome you back for another episode of Jaipur Literature Festival's Words Are Bridges. Words Are Bridges takes you on multilingual journeys, celebrating the richness and diversity of Indian languages through translations. Our session today is Hellfire, Leesa Gazi and Shabnam Nadiya in conversation with Malashri Lal. Author and screenwriter Leesa Gazi's intriguing novel Hellfire has been rendered into English from the original Bangla by translator Shabnam Nadiya. A tale presented in taut prose, it revolves around the caged life of two sisters and introduces us to a carefully constructed web of secrets and deceit. Gazi is also the joint artistic director of a London-based arts company, Komola Collective, and has directed, performed, and co-written critically acclaimed theatre productions. Nadiya's work includes the award-winning translated manuscript of Bangladeshi writer Mashiul Alam's story, Milk. In a conversation with Malashri Lal, they discuss the joys and challenges of translating Hellfire and together unravel the heart of the narrative. Leesa Gazi is a British Bangladeshi writer, actor, filmmaker, and joint artistic director of Komola Collective. Gazi is the co-writer and performer of the play Biranguna, Women of War. She recently directed multi-award-winning documentary Rising Silence that sheds light on the lives of wartime rape survivors. Shabnam Nadiya is a Bangladeshi writer and translator settled in California. A graduate of the Iowa Writers' Workshop, she was awarded the Steinbeck Fellowship for her novel in progress, the Penham Translation Grant. Leesa Gazi is a British Bangladeshi writer, actor, filmmaker, and joint artistic director of Komola Collective. Gazi is the co-writer and performer of the play Birangona, Women of War. She recently directed multi-award-winning documentary Rising Silence that sheds light on the lives of wartime rape survivors. Shabnam Nadiya is a Bangladeshi writer and translator settled in California. A graduate of the Iowa Writers' Workshop, she was awarded the Steinbeck Fellowship for her novel in progress, the Penham Translation Grant, and the Himal South Asian Short Story Prize for her translation of Bangladeshi writer Mashiul Alam's fiction. Nadiya's translations include Leesa Gazi's Hellfire, Moinul Ehsan Saber's The Mercenary, and Shaheen Akhtar's beloved Rangmola. Malashri Lal recently retired from her academic and administrative positions at the University of Delhi's English Department. She is a member of the English Advisory of the Sahitya Academy and Bharatiya Gyanpeeth's Advisory Committee. Her specialization is in literature, women and gender studies. Her books include In Search of Sita, Revisiting Mythology, Tagore and the Feminine, A Journey Through Translations, and Finding Radha, The Quest for Love. Lal has been a senior consultant to the Ministry of Culture, UGC nominee on committees, and a member of International Book Award juries. Before we move on to our session, we request you all to follow us on our handles JLF Litfest on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get notified on the upcoming sessions. In case any of you drop off due to bandwidth issues, you can find us on our YouTube channel, Jaipur Litfest JLF, or on our Facebook page, JLF Litfest. We now present to you Hellfire, Leesa Gazi and Shabnam Nadiya in conversation with Malashri Lal.
Hello everyone. It's indeed a delight to be at the JLF session today. And we have here Leesa Gazi and Shabnam Nadiya, an outstanding novel called Hellfire, set in Dhaka, Bangladesh. I have to tell both of you, Leesa and Nadiya, that once I started, I couldn't put the book down. It was racy, exciting, scintillating, with very smooth translation. And I'm a Bengali knowing person, so I could intuit the language behind, but it just flowed absolutely beautifully. So congratulations, both of you. So this gripping story of the two sisters, Lovely and Beauty, about 40 years old, in a middle-class Bangladeshi family. They are imprisoned in a sense at home by their mother, a most imperious matriarch. And the story moves in a way that the three women are dealing with different kinds of confinement in a way. What, according to Leesa, would you tell us is the impetus for this story? How did it come to you? It's a most unusual and a very driving kind of an energy in that story.
Thank you so much for having us in this session. The impetus actually behind revolves is to feel free, to have freedom. It has come from the deep desire for women to have equal rights to freedom in our society, in our homes, freedom of expression, movement, association, choice. And there's a collective effort in our homes and society, as we all know and feel, to curtail the power of imagination of women, to make them believe they're not good enough. And to keep them within four walls, to make them feel ashamed, even doubtful for their own aspirations. When a woman growing up in that environment realizes for the first time what it's actually feel like to feel free, what it's like to take control of her own life, then something fundamentally changes from deep within. Something happens to that woman. And that woman can never willingly, can go back to a place where she cannot feel free, cannot act free, cannot think free anymore. That woman will try to do everything in her capacity and power to remain free, to be able to feel freely, to act freely.
So that's a very beautiful. So that's a very beautiful theme to pick up and very pertinent in today's context in South Asia, certainly, but many other parts of the world. But your particularities are such that it locates it in a certain domesticity where the refusal to give women freedom is so very evident. Nadiya, could I ask you what led you to selecting this novel to translate? There have been ecstatic reviews about the book already, though it was only published a month ago in the English translation. And I was looking up the Dhaka's Daily Star, which says that the translation floats like charged air, transparent yet propulsive. You surely deserve that compliment.
Thank you.
So, what led you to the selection of this book?
There were multiple elements that really drew me. I've spoken about a couple of things before, like the I was really drawn by the voice, I'll say that. The element of depiction of women's sexuality, which we don't often see this way in Bengali literature. What you mentioned, the specificity of the domestic milieu that we get there, it's very Bangladeshi, very middle-class urban Dhaka life of a certain time, which is essentially when I was coming of age. So that's very, very familiar to me. The other thing that I thought of was that women being portrayed in Bengali, Bangladeshi fiction, you often do, like it's not often that you see a certain way of being. And there were two books that struck me in the last 5 years. One was Rooftop, Hellfire. The other book is by a younger writer, Barnali Shaha. She wrote a novel called The North End. And that's, again, in a woman's world, a very different kind. But both these books, to me, brought out, which I don't really see often, a certain more contemporary younger woman. They're 40. Lovely is 40 and Beauty is just a few years younger than her. But it's just, I don't know, the way that a woman's world is portrayed is often from the outside. And I felt like this book, it's like the inner world that women can inhabit. And then, it's an extreme story, of course. It has to be to, create that pacing, create that drama. But that was, I think, one of the key crucial elements that drew me to this book.
Well, indeed, I can see that you were very engaged with the act of translation itself. So, Leesa, I'm going to ask you a little more about this metaphor of confinement, because the novel deals with women, yet there is a great deal of violence. It's psychological violence, it's physical spaces which are locked all the time. The mother locks the front gate, double padlocks, then she locks the rooftop. The two sisters are locked into their rooms. So there is this constant imaging of imprisonment, confinement, and control over other people. So is the novel looking towards portraying a larger context of confinement when freedom is removed from people as such as in a war or in civil unrest? And I'm particularly thinking of that passage about the crows flying overhead and Farida almost going berserk at that time with a repressed kind of frustration, anger. I don't know how you as an author would look at that passage. Lovely if you could read it and tell us a little about that.
So shall I read it first or tell you about it first?
Maybe say a little about how you came to write that passage and what do the crows stand for?
I was not deliberately done that, but I guess that when you grew up with an environment that is very violent and that is very kind of politically very everywhere it was really uncertain, unsettled. And when you grew up with I think I'm the first generation right after the liberation war of Bangladesh. And while we were growing up, I haven't seen it, but when we were growing up, we knew that we passed a bloody, brutal war. And then what happened? The founder of the nation was assassinated with almost entire his family. We saw two nasty military coups and then almost a decade of dictatorship, and the rhetorics like crossfire and curfew and will be shot at as soon as seen. Dekha matra guli kora hobe. We grew up hearing this rhetoric, observing this reality. So although it was not deliberately done, but I think that experiences that we have, of course, it seeps into the narrative that you are writing. So I'm sure that from there, it is that, and these words become part of our vocabulary when we are growing up. And when you think about it, that all kinds of freedom was taken away from us. So this family could be seen as an extension of that context, but no, it wasn't deliberately done. But I'm glad that it could be interpreted that way.
It's also true that the domestic. Sorry, I was just going to add that. No, I'm just going to add that, like, it's also true that when we think of the domestic, we think of, serene environment and caring and love and all of that. But the domestic milieu can be very, very violent. And I think particularly as women, we see that a lot. So that was another thing that I found fascinating in this book, and that, it's absolutely a domestic setting. We do see a little bit of the city, but the entire book is kind of inside. As you said, it's a confined space of the mind, if not also in addition to being physically confined, their minds are confined in a way. And that violence just, I don't know, like counterbalances what we think of when we think of the domestic, when we think of, oh, women are non-violent creatures, and like all of those things that we take kind of as part of our social understanding of the world. Most of that is actually not very true, and I think that found a space in this book.
True. The novel breaks that stereotype of women being nurturing, and mothers particularly being nurturing.
Yes, absolutely.
And it breaks that idea that there's all this gentleness and love and affection which families share. But we know from many sources in literature that families can be the most oppressive unit in society. And there's that famous novel by Lorca, House of Bernarda Alba, which has a similar mother figure controlling 5 daughters. So maybe, Leesa, you could read us that passage about the crows on the rooftop?
Yes, I'd love to. Yes. কাকের ডাকের কর্কশ ধাক্কায় ফরিদার সম্বিত ফিরে এলো। আকাশের দিকে তাকিয়ে দেখলেন একটা কাক বেশ নিচু দিয়ে তাদের ছাদটাকে কেন্দ্র করে ঘুরছে আর কা কা ডাকছে। আশেপাশে আর কোনো কাক দেখা যাচ্ছে না। কাকটাকে হাত উঁচু করে হুস হুস শব্দে তাড়াবার চেষ্টা করলেন, লাভ হলো না। কাকটা বরং আরো মরিয়া হয়ে ফরিদার উপর থেকে বিপজ্জনক দূরত্বে বৃত্তাকারে ঘুরতে শুরু করলো, আর তারস্বরে ডাকছে তো ডাকছেই। নির্জন দুপুর, আশেপাশের ছাদে একটা প্রাণীও নাই। এরকম সময়ে একটা কাক তীব্র কর্কশ স্বরে কা কা ডেকে চলেছে। ঢেউহীন পুকুরের মতো সে নিস্তরঙ্গ দুপুরে কাকের কর্কশ স্বর মনে হলো অন্য কোনো দুনিয়া থেকে আসছে, শুধু ফরিদাকে সাবধান করবার জন্য। কাকটাকে তাড়াবার জন্য ফরিদার জিদ চেপে গেল। ছাদের কোণা থেকে একটা ঢিল নিয়ে কাকটার দিকে ছুঁড়ে মারলেন। ঢিলটা কাকের আশেপাশেও যেতে পারল না, মাঝপথেই মাটিতে মুখ থুপড়ে পড়ল। ঢিলটাকে গ্রাহ্যই করল না কাকটা। আশেপাশে কোনো কাক মারা যায় নাই তো? একবার ভাবলেন ফরিদা, না না, তাহলে একটা না, সাথে আরো কয়েকটা কাক থাকতো। মনের ভিতরের কুডাক আবার প্রবল বিক্রমে ফিরে এলো। অনেক উঁচু থেকে দেখলে দৃশ্যটা এরকম দেখাবে। একটা নির্জন ছাদ, দুপুরের স্তব্ধতা চারদিক থেকে ছাদটাকে চেপে ধরেছে। সেই ছাদে ততোধিক নির্জন একজন প্রৌঢ়া এলোপাথাড়ি ছুটে বেড়াচ্ছেন, আর মাথার উপরে দুহাত ছুঁড়ে অন্ধের মতো হুস হুস করছেন। তার ঠিক চোখের তারার উপরে কালো মখমলে মোড়ানো একটা কাক বৃত্তাকারে ঘুরছে আর বিরামহীন কা কা ডেকে চলেছে। কিছু একটা ঘটবে, ভয়ঙ্কর কিছু একটা ঘটবে। কুল ছাপানো নদীর মতো এই অমঙ্গল চিন্তা বারবার ফরিদার মনে আছড়ে পড়ছে, আর তখন তার সমস্ত রোষ গিয়ে পড়ছে কাকটার উপর। যেন কাকটাকে তাড়াতে পারলেই তার এবং তার পরিবারের উপর থেকে সমস্ত বালা মুসিবত কেটে যাবে। ছাদে পা দিয়ে একটা অদ্ভুত দৃশ্য দেখে বিউটি স্থবির হয়ে গেল। সে অবাক হয়ে দেখল তার মা মিসেস ফরিদা খানম মাথা খারাপের মতো ছোটাছুটি করছেন, সমানে দুহাত ছুঁড়ছেন শূন্যে। একটা কাক তার সেই দুহাত অনুসরণ করে উড়ে বেড়াচ্ছে। একবার মনে হলো ঠোকর দিবে বা। কাকটা ফরিদার মাথার খুব কাছে নেমে আসছে, আবার হুস খেয়ে গজখানেক উপরে উঠে যাচ্ছে। মায়ের এই মূর্তি দেখে বিউটি ভীষণ রকম চমকালো। সমগ্র জীবনের অস্বাভাবিকত্ব চোখের সামনে নিয়ন সাইনের মতো জ্বলে উঠল। কষ্ট হলো বিউটির, ফরিদার জন্য কষ্ট হলো, লাভলির জন্য, আর নিজের জন্য। অস্তিত্ব জানান না দিয়ে চুপচাপ নিচে নেমে এলো। এত দুধদার করে ওঠার পরও বিউটির উপস্থিতি ফরিদা টের পেলেন না। তিনি তখন কায়মনো বাক্যে কাক তাড়াতে ব্যস্ত। এক সময় কাকটা ক্লান্ত হয়ে পাশের বাড়ির ছাদে গিয়ে বসলো, কিন্তু ডাকা থামালো না। এমন হঠাৎ রণে ভঙ্গ দেয়ায় ফরিদা বোকার মতো দাঁড়িয়ে পড়লেন। টের পেলেন ব্লাউজের ভিতরটা ভিজে চিপচিপা হয়ে গেছে। ছাদের রেলিং ধরে কিছুক্ষণ জোরে জোরে নিঃশ্বাস নিলেন।
That's a very wonderful passage because crows are supposed to be bringing bad luck, and the way you've positioned the crow and the mother almost like a mad woman, pagol manusher moto hath uju kore oke tarabar cheshta. The way you portrayed that, and the second daughter, Beauty, finds her mother in that condition, a woman who's otherwise extremely self-controlled. Nadiya, you've translated that passage beautifully. Any thoughts on that?
Oh, it was one of the scenes that really, really drew me, particularly because of that. This is like one of the moments we see that Farida Khanum, she herself is realizing that she's losing it in some way. But it was like the physical manifestation of everything unraveling. And I have a particular affinity for crows. So I really loved that scene. And I loved that, you know, the cover, the design of the book itself. In fact, I have like my coffee mug, which has Edgar Allan Poe and a crow on it. It's supposed to be a raven, but they, anyway, it's a funny story. Yeah. But that was one of the scenes that I really enjoyed translating. I guess that's all I can tell you about that. But yeah, it's I feel like it's one of the key scenes in the book.
It is, but there are several of these very striking scenes and images. And Lovely, the daughter who's suddenly given the freedom to leave the home, first time ever. These are women, two sisters who've never been allowed to go to school, never been allowed to have friends, never go out, and of course not to be married. And then on her 40th birthday, Lovely is suddenly given this immense opportunity to walk out of the house alone and to wander around Dhaka with the excuse and the task perhaps of looking for some shalwar kameez in the market, in the Gausia market. But many other things happen to her, of course. So, and as Lovely wanders through these various spots in Dhaka, and particularly Ramna Park, which is so well known, some misadventures take place. And it's very difficult for any translator to handle this conversation between Lovely, the person who's alone, out in the open for the first time, and the so-called man in her head. The speaking voice, the inner voice that is constantly debating with her, mocking her, challenging her, doing all kinds of things. And it's a male voice. So as a translator, how did you deal with this duality in Lovely? And particularly the Ramna Park episodes?
The Ramna Park episodes, I think, is the favorite part of for me in that book. And that was one of the like that particular thing. But the conversation between Lovely and the man in her head, and then the red muffler guy, we never find out his name, but she has a crucial exchange with him. The thing that I had to be careful about in those scenes were trying to keep the registers different, because how Lovely thinks herself, the tone of it is very different than when the man in the head speaks to her. As you said, he's mocking her, he pushes her, provokes her to do things. And I was very curious, and I'd love to hear Leesa talk about why she, again, this is like something we have not discussed, but I was very curious why the man was a man and not a woman, like why her inner voice was not a woman's voice. I found that fascinating. Yeah. So just keeping the registers different. Sorry?
Yeah, it would have something to do with a repressed sexuality. That's my sense in reading the book. But would you like to read us some passages from that part of the novel?
Sure. So at this point, Lovely in her meanderings, and I feel like the fact that Lovely was let out on that particular day was also an issue of Farida trying to control everything in her vicinity. And depending on her situation, her mental situation, she had to let go of one thing to keep hold of another, the birthday meal that she's preparing for Lovely, which has to be perfect. So when Lovely is finally let out, it's she can't believe it. She even thinks like this is something that's worth going into the Guinness Book of Records. This has never happened before, that she's been let out by herself without a chaperone. So anyway, she, as you said, hits various spots in the city, and she ends up in Ramna Park. And she's sitting on a bench, and this guy who is referred to in the book as Red Muffler Guy, he approaches her and strikes up a conversation, and then they're talking, and out of the blue, he kind of says, "Do you want to go with me to my apartment? I live alone." So it's clearly a sexual proposition that's happening, which is, it's not very common in our culture at any rate. So it's a bit of a stunner for her, and she doesn't know quite how to react. And she's debating whether she should or shouldn't. The man inside her head had been strangely silent, not a peep out of him. He was lying low. Who knew if he had been rattled by the abrupt turn of events? But now he perked up. Apu Munid, let's go to his place. It sounds like he will also be quite hospitable and welcoming. Lovely strongly opposed his suggestion. She shivered. No, no. Amma will kill me if she finds out. How will she ever know? Are, you're going to have a showdown today anyway. You might as well go all the way. She began to answer the man inside her head, but then went quiet. Red Muffler Guy was staring at her with the hint of a smile on his lips. Barely half an hour ago, she had thought of this same young man as fearful and timid, someone still wet behind the ears. And now there was this devious expression playing on his face. A pose. It had all been a pose. She couldn't decide whether to answer the man inside her head or just go with the Red Muffler Guy. It was true that she wanted to follow this young man somewhere, anywhere. Even if they couldn't go anywhere, they could at least walk along the lake shore ahead of them. What harm could that do? Don't worry about me, Red Muffler Guy said. You two go ahead and finish your conversation. I'm in no hurry. I'm not talking to anyone. What's the name of the man inside your head? He has no name. No name? No name. You should give him a name. There's no one inside my head. Lovely's eyes teared up. She had no clue where the tears came from or why. She felt like Red Muffler Guy was mocking her with the same cruelty that drove children to chase a mad woman with taunts of freak, freak. Children didn't understand how cruel they could be. Did he understand? Okay, I'm going to go and pick up a couple of cigarettes. In the meantime, the two of you can decide whether you want to come with me or not. No pressure. You only come if it makes you happy. The young man stood up, and Lovely immediately became certain that he wasn't coming back. She felt a desperate desire to say, yes, I'll go. I don't have to talk it over with anyone. I'll go. But inevitably, she didn't. When had her desires ever borne fruit? Red Muffler Guy vanished into the trees of Ramna Park with long strides. The man inside Lovely's head had been burning to talk for a while and couldn't hold himself back. You'll never get a chance like this, Apomuni. How long can you make do with just your fingers? Come on, let's go. What can go wrong? This isn't a guy who's likely to attack you or kill you. How do you know? I know, Apomuni, you're itching to go there. You've never known what love is. Now that you have this one chance, explore it with your heart, with your body. I've never known what love is? How could you say that? My heart still burns. Sorry, Apomuni, I'm sorry. I'm wrong. Of course, you know, but physical love? You'll spend an entire lifetime and then die one day, but you'll never know what physical love is. What the hell is that? Just think that the Creator himself has handed you this one chance. Tawba, tawba, shame. No, I could never do something like that. You've egged me on to do many shameful things. Amma, oh, screw your Amma. Who gives a shit about Amma here? I've egged you on to do many shameful things. Is that fair? Was I the one who brought you all that porn by Rashomai Gupta? All I said was, put your fingers to good use. But Apamani, can buttermilk sate the thirst for cream? That's why I was saying, let's go. I always knew I shouldn't talk to you, that it would land me in trouble someday. Big trouble. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Leesa, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I want to say this voice actually came as a coping mechanism for Lovely to be sane in that household, and Lovely actually desires intimacy. She craves for love, and from her perspective, someone who she can talk to, that imaginary person, feels only logical to be a man, and whom she can talk to, mundane stuff to whimsical. So it also works as a coping mechanism for her.
True, coping in many ways, even with an hardly understood sexuality, with relations, with romance, what had happened to her with her cousin. So the women characters, Beauty, of course, is another kind of a person. And although the sisters are in close proximity with one another and play games together, they also have all kinds of differences of opinion and behavior. And whereas Lovely is not a particularly good-looking woman at all. She has two braids, and she's, her mother keeps sort of pointing out to various things. Beauty is, according to her name and her behavior, just obsessed with skincare and beauty care, and she does lentil packs and all that kind of thing. So the differential between the two sisters, how does that work out? Because Lovely is the retiring one, but she's the one who's allowed to go out. Beauty seems the more aggressive one, and she has been made to stay at home and gets even more aggressive. And that's when she goes looking for her mother and gets to the rooftop. So what is the relationship between the two sisters, Leesa?
Relationship between the two sisters are very loving, at the same time very conflicting as well. Beauty loves her sister, but at the same time she has this very deep rooted hatred. Hatred is a very strong word, but I would like to use it here. Hatred towards her because of the fact that she feels that she is, she thinks that she is more beautiful than her. She thinks she's more, vibrant than her, more kind of, and she's not that boring like her sister. But still, their cousin, the only male gaze that they experienced in their lives, didn't want to have anything to do with her. That rejection, that self-imposed feeling of rejection, actually deeply hurt. It deeply hurts Beauty, and she thinks and she puts the blame on her sister that, because of her sister, I didn't get to experience this. Because of her sister, he did not even look at me. That sense of rejection, she felt, and that she kind of blames Lovely for that. And when we see that she actually tells her mother about their relationship, Ria's cousins, and her sister's relationship. I don't know whether I'm giving away too much.
Don't give out the plot. We'll leave you with that. And Nadia, one of the most difficult tasks for a translator is to deal with dialogue, and particularly with the English equivalent for language spoken by people like domestic helpers who would not have any access to English. And of course, you cannot have a domestic family scene in an Indian home or a Bangladeshi home and many others in Asia without that domestic category. They have a very key role to play in this novel. Rabia's ma, that young boy. So when you were translating that kind of language from Bangla to English, what kind of challenges did you face and how did you resolve them?
It was actually easier in this book than in others that I've worked on because, and this is something I've wondered about, urban speech is peppered with English. And depending on your level of education, depending on your class, the English usage varies. But in this book, we don't really see that. And I've wondered whether that was also a function of how this household in particular is very, very isolated. For instance, there's that moment where we find out, oh, there's a cell phone in this house. And just from Farida Khanum's thinking surrounding the device, we realize that cell phones have been there for a while. It's just this household doesn't use it the way, or that even the entry of a regular telephone into the household was a big deal. Like she had not wanted a phone. She basically wants to cut off everyone from the outside world, and herself possibly acting as a conduit towards that. So in terms of language, that was one thing that didn't really come up for this book, interestingly. Their speech is not strewn with English phrases, and especially when Rabia's ma speaks or when the boy speaks, I didn't really encounter anything. I did translate this book at least 2-3 years ago, so I might be missing something, Leesa.
I think that the dialogue part for the maids and for Pichi, that servant boy. When I was writing it, it came from the source because from the way they talk, and we are very. I'm very used to this pattern of talking, and I wanted to keep that, but at the same time, when that family, the two sisters and the mother, when they talk, it's not that a shift from them, and that is also very practiced in middle class houses. It depends on where you are from, which part of the city you live in, of course. But that's why the dialogue wise, there is a distinct difference between their way of talking, but at the same time there's a similarity, and I wanted to keep them to show that even there are similarities in their expression, in their dialogues, but they're miles apart in their status, and they're miles apart in their in their expression of freedom or rights. So it is very fascinating for me in that household how actually Pichi is the most freer member of this family. He goes out, he brings things, and he is like a window to love, beauty, and that is what I wanted to keep, and dialogue was also that similarities I wanted to keep to show that how their position and status is miles and miles apart.
And that's true about that the speech is not that apart, like not that different. Like the gap isn't huge between the employers and the domestic staff. But in a lot of cases, what happens is when the children go to school, there's a certain urbanization that happens. Speech patterns shift, and in this household that never happens because these girls don't have any outside influences at all. They've been imprisoned most of their lives. So that shift away from where Farida Khanum comes from, the village, and Mukhlis Sahib as well. They come from different parts of the country to Dhaka, which is the case with many middle class families in Bangladesh. Like that's where the jobs are, that's where good schools are, so that's where people head towards. So that change never happens, that shift never happens for this family or for these children. Because they never go to school. The other thing I thought, I didn't actually think Pichi was the freest one there. I thought it was Rabe Azma, because she had Pichi. I mean, he's a kid. He comes and goes, and like a child, he's very cognizant about the different about the power structure in the household, but he's also in a way
very aware of
it. He's very cognizant of it. Yes, absolutely.
Very aware of it. Yeah.
But with Rabe Azma, I felt it was fascinating to see. There were moments where, for instance, when she's being berated by Farida Khanum, she thinks, well, this woman, she treats her own daughter so badly. Compared to that, I'm better off. And she is, in a way, because she doesn't have that emotional engagement that the daughters have, obviously, with the mother. She is capable of seeing. Sorry?
Yeah. Sorry for cutting in, but we might run out of time. And I just wanted to ask both of you that the women characters seem much stronger than the men characters. One almost forgets about the father
their
of
existence,
Lovely, and that cousin Riaz. And I don't want to give away the story, and I think people who are listening to this program should go out and get the book. But the male characters seem so much more timid, cowardly. She even calls her husband half dead. So was there some kind of a thought of this nature that went into the creation of the male-female character difference?
Yes, yes, of course. When I was carrying these characters, it was my conscious decision not to show any men as representatives of the horrors of patriarchy. I wanted to do that because patriarchy is so implanted in us that we don't need men to manifest it. And we immediately recognize it even in the absence of men in a household. That is what I wanted to, I wanted to explore. And you can find patriarchy at work, even in families there are no men. So this is more often that not how it works in societies. That is what I really wanted to show, that even you don't need men to project patriarchy. It is so ingrained, it is so implanted in our psyche, in our homes, and in our society.
One last question, and I'll put this to Nadiya. As a translator, does the ideological thinking of the writer, as in this case, that patriarchy can be shown through women, you don't need men, does that interfere with the way you as a translator deal with the text? Your own thinking on the subject, for instance?
I wouldn't say it interferes with it, because I think that is something that we're both on the same page on. Because patriarchy it's a system, and I'm finding it a little bit difficult without describing the dynamic between the characters. I don't want to give away the plot, but the fact that you brought up the men, they're almost like the marginal characters in the story.
Yeah, right.
You don't really get to focus on what their side of it is really. Farida's husband, for instance.
It's not necessary to focus on them. And
no, absolutely not. It's not.
Sure.
But I thought it was fascinating that one other thing that I really liked about it was that it's very evident that he is also a victim of patriarchy.
Yes,
of course.
He has a very, very unhappy life. He has a marginal existence in his own family, his own household. And the other...
That's a very important point. And We have run out of time, so we'll have to end our discussion. It's a very rich, complex, and brilliantly written book. So congratulations to Leesa and congratulations, Nadiya, for that wonderful translation. It's been great to be with you and to discuss the book, and I wish you the very best. And I hope all our listeners will go out and get a copy of Hellfire.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thank you for making the time. This was really fun to do. Thanks.
Thank you, Leesa, Shabnam, and Malashri, for that beautiful session. We just didn't want it to end. If you've enjoyed this session, please do share with your friends and on your social media pages. Thank you all for being such a wonderful audience. We promise to be back next week again for another beautiful session of Words Are Bridges. Till then, good night.